My name is Michael Reed, and I'm a photographer specializing in wildlife and nature. I came to Australia 3 years ago, escaping the noise and chaos of London, seeking the peace and vast open spaces I had always dreamed of. I never imagined that those forests would become the source of my eternal nightmares. On the morning of Tuesday, the 15th of August, I loaded my gear and headed toward Talangi National Forest, about a 2-hour drive from Sydney. The weather was unusually cold and fog wrapped around the tops of the giant eucalyptus trees like ghosts dancing on the horizon. A strange shiver ran down my spine, but I dismissed it as mere excitement for a new adventure. I arrived at the parking lot around 8 in the morning. I noticed that my car was the only one there, which didn't alarm me at first. I often visit remote places on weekdays. I slung my backpack, weighing about 15 kilograms, over my shoulder and began walking down the dirt trail leading deeper into the forest. After an hour of walking, I noticed something strange. The birds suddenly stopped singing. The silence was heavy, terrifying, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. I paused for a moment, straining my ears. Nothing. Just the sound of the wind passing through the eucalyptus leaves, making a sound like a faint whisper. The whisper of the eucalyptus, that's what the Aboriginal people call it. They say ancient spirits speak through these trees, warning strangers not to venture further. I used to think it was just beautiful folklore told by tour guides to add a sense of mystery to the hikes. I continued walking until I reached a relatively open area. There, I saw something I wasn't prepared for. On the trunk of a massive gum tree, there were ancient carvings and drawings. Not the usual Aboriginal rock art, but something entirely different. Drawings depicting tall, terrifyingly slender figures with large, hollow eyes. They were surrounded by strange spiral patterns. I stepped closer to photograph the carvings. As I pressed the camera shutter, I heard a sound behind me. The sound of soft footsteps on dry leaves. I spun around quickly, but there was no one there. Just the trees, silent, towering, as if they were watching me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice tense. No answer. I went back to photographing the carvings, but then I noticed something horrifying. In one of the photos I had just taken, a strange shape appeared in the background. A tall, slender figure standing among the trees. It was a pale gray color, almost blending in with the bark of the gum trees. I zoomed in on the image to see more clearly. It was a humanoid shape, but its limbs were unnaturally long. Its arms hung down to its knees, and its fingers were as long as tree branches. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. I looked behind me again. Nothing, just the trees and the shadows. But the shadows, they were moving. I swear they were moving against the direction of the sun. The shadows of the gum trees were leaning toward me, stretching and shrinking as if they were breathing. I knew I had to leave immediately. I grabbed my bag and started jogging back down the trail. But the trail was no longer as I remembered it. The trees seemed different, more twisted, and the fog had grown thicker even though it was approaching noon. I tried to use my phone to check my bearings, but the battery was completely dead, despite having charged it fully before I left. In that moment, I heard the whisper. It wasn't the whisper of the wind this time. It was clear words in a language I didn't understand, yet I felt their meaning deep in my core. They were calling me, calling my name. Michael! Michael! I spun around in panic. The shadows were closing in. They were no longer just shadows, but forms standing at the edge of my vision, disappearing whenever I tried to focus on them. I ran as fast as I could, thorns tearing at my legs, branches slapping my face. I don't know how long I ran. Maybe an hour, maybe minutes. Time ceased to have meaning in that forest. Suddenly, I saw light. I burst out from the trees to find myself standing in front of my car. I jumped inside and turned the ignition with trembling hands. Before I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. At the edge of the forest, there he stood. Tall, slender, gray like the trunk of a gum tree. He slowly raised his long hand as if waving me goodbye. I returned to Sydney that night in shock, silent. I told no one what happened, fearing they would think I was insane. But it didn't end there. Over the following nights, I would wake to the sound of soft tapping on my bedroom window. I live on the 5th floor, and when I look out the window, I see nothing. But in the morning, I find strange marks on the glass. Marks that resemble fingerprints, but they are too long, too slender, like the fingers of that thing in the forest. Last night, I was sitting on my balcony, gazing at the city skyline. I heard a sound coming from the street below. I looked down. Beneath the lone gum tree in the park across from my building, there he stood. He slowly tilted his head up toward me with his hollow eyes, and he smiled. I no longer go into forests. I've even started to hate eucalyptus trees. But the worst part is that I've begun seeing him everywhere, in window reflections, in old photographs, in my dreams, waiting, watching, remembering. And one day, I know he will finish what he started in that forest, because some invitations cannot be refused forever. My name is Sarah Johnson. I'm 34 years old and work as a geologist for a mineral exploration company in Western Australia. My story began with a routine work assignment and ended with a nightmare from which I cannot wake. Last February, the company assigned me to survey a remote area in the Karajaro forest, about 400 kilometers from Perth. The mission was simple: take soil and rock samples from an unexplored region and return within 3 days. I brought along my young assistant, Daniel Walker, an enthusiastic new graduate eager for fieldwork. We set off in our four-wheel drive at dawn on Monday. The road was long and tedious, mostly through barren, semi-arid land. But after 6 hours of driving, the landscape began to change. We entered an area of dense forest with giant jara trees soaring up to 40 meters high. "This place is strange," Daniel said, looking out the window. "It feels like another world." I was thinking the same thing. The forest was unnervingly quiet. We saw no wildlife, which was odd for an area known for its biodiversity. Even the insects seemed scarce. We reached the plant campsite around 4 in the afternoon. It was a beautiful spot beside a small stream, surrounded on all sides by trees. As we were setting up the tent, I noticed something unusual about the rock formation about 200 meters from the camp. "Look at this, Daniel," I called out. There was an opening in the side of a rocky hill. A narrow opening barely wide enough for a single person leading into what appeared to be an underground cave. I pulled out my flashlight and took a quick look inside. The air coming from the opening was cold, unnaturally cold compared to the daytime heat, which had exceeded 35 degrees Celsius. "We should check it out tomorrow," I said, feeling a strange chill. "Today we rest." That night was restless. I barely slept, and my dreams were filled with strange noises, sounds like a deep humming coming from beneath the earth. I woke several times, and once I thought I saw a faint blue light emanating from the cave opening. But when I focused my eyes, it vanished. The next morning, we ate a quick breakfast and headed to the cave. Daniel was excited. I, on the other hand, felt a strange knot of anxiety in my stomach. Something was wrong with this place, but I couldn't pinpoint what. We entered the cave one after the other. The passage was narrow at first, then suddenly opened into a large underground chamber. We turned on our powerful flashlights, and what we saw was both breathtaking and terrifying. The cave walls were covered in ancient paintings. Not the Aboriginal art I knew from my previous geological studies. This was completely different. They depicted humanoid figures but with distorted features, hollow eyes, mouths frozen open in silent screams. Even stranger, there were concentric circles dotted with a dark red color, dried like old blood. "What the hell is this?" Daniel whispered, his voice trembling. I couldn't answer. I was mesmerized by a sight I had never seen referenced in any scientific literature. I took a few photos with my phone, then noticed something else. In the center of the chamber, there was a circular hole in the floor, about 1 meter in diameter. I approached cautiously and dropped a small stone into it. I waited to hear it hit the bottom. I heard nothing. Seconds passed. 10 seconds, 20, 30, total silence. "That's impossible," I said softly. "The hole is too deep." Suddenly we heard a sound. It wasn't the sound of a stone hitting rock. It was a different sound, a sound like breathing. Deep, slow, coming from the depths of the hole. Daniel looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. "What is that?" Before I could answer, our flashlights suddenly went out, both of them, at the exact same moment. Even though we had fully charged the batteries the night before, the darkness was thick, suffocating. I pulled out my phone to use its flashlight, but the phone was dead too. "Sarah?" I heard Daniel's trembling voice. "There's something in here with us." I heard it too. The sound of movement in the darkness. The sound of something crawling over the wet rocks, something large. The sound was coming from the direction of the hole. "Run!" I screamed with all my might. We ran toward the narrow passage leading outside. I stumbled in the dark, my hands feeling along the cold walls. I heard Daniel panting behind me. Then I heard him scream, "Help me, something's got me." I turned in the darkness. I reached out my hand, trying to reach him. I touched his hand for a moment. It was cold as ice. Then I felt something grab my ankle and pull me with immense force. I fell to the ground. I was screaming and struggling, my fingernails scraping against the rock as I tried to hold on to anything. I don't know how I survived. Maybe because I was closer to the exit. I managed to break free from that thing's grip and kept running. I burst out of the cave into the glaring daylight, gasping and shaking. But Daniel didn't come out. I waited for hours. I called his name over and over. I tried to call emergency services, but my phone refused to work even after I had left the cave. Finally, I decided to drive to the nearest town for help. I reached a small town called Meridian after 2 hours of frantic driving. I reported to the police. At first, they didn't believe me. They thought I was in shock or suffering from heat stroke, but I insisted. They formed a search team and headed to the cave. When they arrived, they found only one thing: Daniel's running shoe. It was placed neatly at the entrance to the cave as if someone had deliberately left it there. Inside the shoe was a piece of bark carved with a single image, a spiral circle with a hollow eye inside it. They never found Daniel's body. They told me he probably fell into a deep crevice or got lost in the branching cave passages. But I know the truth. Daniel didn't get lost. Something took him. Something that is still there, deep inside that black cave. I quit my exploration job after that incident. I couldn't even look at rocks without remembering. But the worst part is what happens now. On some nights I wake up to find red dirt on my bedroom floor, dirt from that cave, and every Sunday morning, the day we went there, I find a new mark on my window pane. The same image, a spiral circle with a hollow eye inside it. And the worst part of all, sometimes I hear Daniel's voice at night calling me from far away, from beneath the earth, asking me why I left him there. My name is Ethan Wilson, and I'm 43 years old. I work as a civil engineer in Melbourne, but I grew up in a small town on the edge of the Otway National Forest in Victoria. I left that town 20 years ago and swore I would never return, but fate had other plans. 6 months ago, I received a phone call from my mother. Her voice was shaky, tired. "Ethan, you need to come back. Your father is very ill." I hadn't seen my father in 20 years. We weren't on good terms. He was a hard man, practical, believing in nothing that couldn't be seen or touched. He mocked me when I was young and told him about the things I saw in the forest. He said I had a sick imagination. He said I needed a psychiatrist. Eventually, I left on my 23rd birthday and never looked back. But now he was dying. So I packed my bags and returned. The town hadn't changed much. The same dirt roads, the same modest wooden houses, the same heavy stillness that hung over the place. But when I walked into my childhood home, I felt the weight of the past crash down on my shoulders like a mountain of stones. My father lay in his bed, gaunt and pale, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. When he saw me, he didn't smile. He simply motioned with his weak hand toward a chair beside the bed. "You came at last," he said in a low, raspy voice. "I knew you would, because of the lake." I froze in place. The lake. The lake of lost souls, as we children used to call it. I hadn't spoken that name in 20 years. "Don't mention that," I said coldly. But he insisted. "Listen to me, Ethan, I'm dying. And I want to tell you the truth before I go. What you saw at that lake when you were young was real. I felt anger rising in my chest. My whole life you told me I was crazy, and now you tell me it was real? He sighed deeply. I said that to protect you. I thought if you believed it was just your imagination, you would forget. But they don't forget. They remember. And they wait. I asked him what he meant, but a severe coughing fit overcame him. That night, my father passed away. After the funeral, I found myself drawn toward the lake. I hadn't planned it. My feet carried me against my will along the old paths I had known in childhood. The forest was quiet as always. The giant myrtle trees stood like silent guardians, and ferns blanketed the ground like a thick green carpet. I reached the lake at sunset. The surface of the water was smooth as a mirror, reflecting the orange and red hues of the sky. Everything seemed peaceful, beautiful, but I knew this calm was deceptive. I sat on a large rock by the shore. Memories began flooding back against my will. I was 7 years old when it first happened. I was fishing with my friend Tommy. It was a beautiful sunny day. Then suddenly the water's surface grew murky. Shapes appeared beneath the water, humanoid shapes, but their limbs were too long, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. They were looking at us from under the surface. Tommy didn't see anything. He thought I was joking, but I saw them clearly, and they were pointing at me. I shook my head, trying to push the memory away. The sun was setting quickly. I should go back. But as I tried to stand up, I noticed something on the water's surface. The moon's reflection was beginning to appear, but beneath it, just under the surface, there were shapes. The same shapes I had seen 30 years ago. I blinked hard. Maybe it was fatigue and stress. But when I opened my eyes, the shapes were still there, and they were closer this time. Ethan! I heard the whisper coming from the lake, a soft, sad, feminine voice. Ethan, come. I slowly rose to my feet. Part of me wanted to run, but another part, a deep, dark part, wanted to get closer, wanted to see. Come to us. We've been waiting for you for so long. I stepped toward the water. My feet were ankle deep before I realized what I was doing. The water was cold, so very cold. I quickly retreated, my heart pounding violently. I ran back to my father's house without stopping. I bolted the door and drew the curtains. I stayed awake all night, listening to the sounds of the forest outside the window. And sometime before dawn, I heard a soft knock at the door. Who's there? I asked, my voice trembling. No one answered, but I heard a sound like water droplets falling on the floor. I peered through a gap in the curtain. No one was there, but on the doorstep there were wet footprints, small footprints like those of children, leading toward the door, but no footprints leading away. The next night I had a strange dream. I was a child again, standing at the lake. But this time I wasn't alone. A woman was emerging from the water, beautiful, with long black hair and deep green eyes. She extended her hand toward me. Why won't you join us, Ethan? We don't hurt anyone. We just... wait. We've waited for you for 30 years. I woke up to find myself standing at the front door of the house, barefoot, my hand on the doorknob. I had been about to go outside. That was 6 months ago. I'm still at my father's house. I can't leave. Something is preventing me. Every time I try to get in my car and drive away, I find myself walking toward the lake instead, and the dreams grow clearer every night. Now I see more faces beneath the water. I see Tommy there. Tommy drowned in this lake when we were 10. They said it was an accident, but now I know the truth. I see my father in my dreams too, standing beneath the water among them, looking at me with sad eyes. He doesn't speak, he just looks. The townspeople avoid me. They say I've been cursed by the forest. Maybe they're right. Last night I woke up to find myself knee-deep in the water. The lake's surface shimmered in the moonlight, and they were there, dozens of them, standing just below the surface looking at me, smiling. Soon, they whispered in a single voice, very soon. I don't know how much time I have left. I feel myself growing weaker each day. I sleep more, and the dreams grow longer. Sometimes in broad daylight, I catch my reflection in the mirror and find it pale, tinged with blue, like their faces. If anyone reads this story, please don't come to the Lake of Lost Souls. Don't go near that forest. And if you hear the whisper coming from the water, run, run and never look back. As for me, I'm tired of running. Tonight, when the call comes, I will answer. I will go to the lake. I will enter the water. I will see what waits beneath the surface. Perhaps I will finally find peace. And perhaps I will join them in the waiting. Waiting for the next visitor who heard the whisper of the lake. The forests of Australia are ancient, older than we can imagine. They hold countless secrets beneath the shadows of their towering trees. And as Michael, Sarah, and I have learned, some secrets should remain buried, because there are things in these forests that do not sleep, do not forget, and do not forgive. And if you ever plan to visit the forests of Australia, remember my words. When the stranger enters the forest enters the stranger. And when the trees begin to whisper, run.